All right. We are back. Welcome back. After rewatching X-Men, the original, we are back. And we are going to dive right in. This week we are still on our fourth beer, which is good. We didn't jump into a fifth just yet. But we are back, and I think we'll dive right into our segment we're calling Deep Impact, which is our response and kind of what we think about it. So, Tim, I'm going to hand it up to you. Deep Impact, what do you got?
I think it's as good as I remember, but definitely not as amazing as I thought it was. Watching it again, it definitely takes its time to establish the world. It's got some cool moments. I think it was probably one of those things that at the time I remember being so new and different and just exciting. But it's almost like when I watched the James Bond movies. Sorry, brief aside.
No, do what you want. We can cut out whatever we don't like.
When I watched the original Bond movies, I'm like, man, these do not hold up because I've become so used to how they've developed and grown. And so I think about the X-Men movies or other comic book movies and see how they've kind of built upon this. So I had a reverence for the original. But it was fine. I mean, there are cool moments. I've got some notes we'll talk through. But overall, it was... it's been probably at least 10 years since I've seen it.
Minimum. Yeah, for me, even it's outside of catching it on TV sometimes and seeing scenes, but front to back, it's probably been 15 years for me.
Exactly. So it's kind of cool to revisit again with that. But overall, it's hit and miss. I disagree with some of the critical stuff we'll talk about here, but overall, it's kind of cool revisiting, but it's a mixed bag. How about you?
I like it a lot less than I did in my brain before this. Yeah, I don't... It's not a bad movie at all.
No.
At all. I was bored for a good 30 to 45 minutes of an almost, I suppose, 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
It is not well written, and I think that's just a testament to it.
Yeah.
What I was struck by was... Man, Hugh Jackman is glorious. He is just, I don't know how they found him. I mean, I do know how, because I know Russell Crowe was a big fan of his, and that's kind of how this came about.
Sure.
But no, I'm like, outside of him, Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, and then of course James Marsden, who we just adore.
Yes.
I was uninterested in almost anything that was going on. So
Totally.
It did not hold up. It does not, and it's not necessarily its fault because the industry took it to a new level after this. So it's not its fault. At the time, it was awesome. I think it's still really good. There's great scenes. There's great moments, but it didn't hold up to me at all, or for me.
No, it's got a cool standard. I mean, I think back to in the 60s when Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created it, the whole series about persecution and this message of inclusion. And it just I think about that still resonates when you think about some of the messages of people being fearful of others and how they're thinking about portraying these mutants and coming to terms with all that. That being said, I agree. I was man, probably that middle third segment is just holy cow. We joked a little bit, talk about foreshadowing the end of Ellis Island super early and then hitting 5 points throughout. Hey, something is huge is going to happen at Ellis Island, and it takes forever to get there. It's I can't. I was trying to think about maybe half an hour in when Magneto does his little trick and basically mutates Senator Kelly. It's half an hour in. I was the grand scheme is told half an hour into it. And they're setting it up. It's going to be at the island, and it takes another hour to get there. And I just try to think about other movies, comic book, where it's so transparent about what the villain's plans are, and then it takes forever. Usually, it's a bait and switch. I mean, there was a little bit with the Rogue, who's who he really wants, but Wolverine thinks it's him. Fine, but man, it just it dragged to get there.
Right, and I don't think. It's just not a well written movie in that sense. It's a good adaptation in some ways.
Yep.
But is there a worse line than when Storm and Toad are fighting, and it's just like, what, you know what happens to a toad when you get struck by lightning? The same thing as everything else.
Yeah.
It's like, my 11-year-old could have written a better joke.
Yeah.
And maybe that was the point.
Sure.
But it is a poorly written film. But that's also not... It's not what they wanted.
Sure.
They didn't care about it. Later Marvel movies, they bring in screenwriters who know more about it. And
yes.
And that becomes something that they're focused on. But this is not... It's just not well written.
And I know we think about now through the lens of like what the MCU has done with starting with, you know, the last 12 years or so with Tony Stark's story, and having all these separate characters eventually come into a combined focus with the Avengers in 2012, which was unheard of at the time. Like a huge risk to take the patience over years to tell a story and then combine that. And it feels so forced at times watching this, where it's similar to my critique in many ways of the DC universe, where they have taken a quicker route to try and get to the combined stories, where, I mean, I watch it with my wife when it first was coming out and having to explain, who these characters are, because they didn't take the time to tell an origin story. But there's like pigeonhole these things and be like, oh, here's the Flash, here's it. And it's this whole effort around, you know, you probably should have some knowledge of these characters before you come into a movie like that. Watching X-Men again, I think I loved it when it first came out because I had such appreciation for the comics. Mm-hmm. But if you were coming at this fresh, holy God, it must have been, I don't know, confusing or kind of like, who is this? What's that? Who is this guy? Like his eyes, like it just, it does take a time to kind of explain and flesh it out, but it definitely feels rushed to have some of these characters come in.
It does. And even what this does well, in from, I think, a writing standpoint, but really from a casting standpoint, is they were able to bring people in who could humanize their characters in a way, which is interesting to say about mutants, but it is...
Sure.
It brought... So you didn't need the backstory to at least relate to them.
Sure.
So I agree with you from a writing standpoint and a story standpoint. It definitely lacks that. I do think they got lucky with being able to cast this with the actors that they have. And so that's where they benefit from it. But it doesn't... This does a great job of starting the world.
Yeah.
And the one thing I will say that holds up is when you do watch the future X-Men movies, all of them, the base that this is, like, this isn't built on sand. This is a bedrock. Like, they did a great job of making a film that could at least stand with 8 more movies on top of it, on its shoulders, and still hold up enough from a story standpoint. So they did a good job there of building a world that X2, which is phenomenal and an amazing movie.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we say that now. I haven't seen it in probably 10 years.
I watched it like a year ago. I love that movie. It is outstanding.
I just remember, like, I'm a little gun shy of like passing accolades to, like, I do remember it being a far superior
it's outstanding
movie.
It's
one of those things of like
They took the 5 or 6 things they do really well here.
Okay.
And really embrace that and then move on. And they start to go deeper into the characters.
Sure.
And that's what Marvel, now this is of course Fox, but that's what Marvel did so well. Sure. You mentioned Iron Man. This was what Iron Man was 08.
Yeah, 08.
I mean, this is 8 years before that. So they just didn't know what they had.
Yes.
So in that sense, I think this holds up as a base. So I was actually pretty impressed how much it holds up from that standpoint.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. There's the foundation of it where you've built the world. You've allowed so many variations upon these different characters and themes, and it sets it up well for what's to come. Mm-hmm. So that was smart in that sense. But yeah, anyway. But speaking of cast, we talked through some of the cast. So we already said before our affiliation or appreciation of James Marsden.
Well, yeah, we mentioned it here, but yes, he is. I love him.
Yes, to me, he stands out as one of the characters. I mean, I think about all the roles he's had, like in TV, like Westworld or Heck, even Sonic the Hedgehog, watching it with the
Dude,
kids.
he was awesome.
It's so good.
Yeah.
But I challenge anybody, and this is going to maybe be a nerd card, but
Nerd.
I love romantic comedies in many ways to have like appreciation or connection with like these dumb movies that are just mindless but enjoyable. Watch 27 Dresses. This is a hill I will die on. It's terrible, except for James Marsden.
Sure. Well, Katherine Heigl's in it, so immediately it's not
Exactly.
great.
Exactly. Sure. But that being said, watch it, and he's phenomenal.
Sure.
And that solidified my love of James Marsden. So watching him be like, oh yeah, his rapport and banter with Jackman as Logan totally aligns with the comics and growing like the series growing up. So yeah, their back and forth is really well established, and you can see them come like melt a little bit and come together and see like, okay, there's appreciation there. So
yeah, they hate each other.
Yes,
but they get along, or they
have mutual
common
respect.
Right goals. I will say, yeah, for me, it's Enchanted is what turned me around on Marsden.
Yeah.
Just he dives into every character he's in.
Yes.
And he just inhabits that character, and it's fun.
Yes.
He's always campy in those roles.
Yes. Hop.
So
Stupid movie Hop.
Yeah, Hop's terrible.
Watching with the kids.
Yep.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Except he fully commits to being the Easter Bunny. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of cast, the thing that struck to me, I can't. Who was it in Social Network that talked about how McKellen and Stewart were underused?
Oh, Peter Travers.
It was Travers, and he's 100% right.
I disagree.
Anyway, I think they were underused. They're good, but I think McKellen he doesn't hit as a bad guy that well in this movie. One of the reasons X2 is better is because he fleshes out more as a bad guy, and he is so good as a bad guy because he has the best bad guys are not necessarily villainous and they want to kill everybody. Usually the best bad guys are ones who you can buy into the why of what they're doing.
Sure. And
I think McKellen has that, but he's not in it enough. So I think they just underused him in a sense of his story, and you have this actor who's outstanding in anything he does. Stewart all of a sudden is infected, and that made sense of the story because then the X-Men need to sort of stand up and do their own thing. But even his power doesn't get fleshed out really until later movies. So I think they just underused him in that one from a casting standpoint because you got McKellen there. I mean, you got this amazing actor, and he's sort of like,
Yeah, I agree. Like, I'll tell you that. Yeah, I think how I took it was, or approached it was, I didn't see them as underused in the sense of what they did with the role they were given.
Mm-hmm.
They are like, I agree. Like McKellen, and I think Marvel does a great job of this with their villains of not having them be this like mustache twirling, woman trapped or tied to the road or the train tracks. Like, whoa!
Exactly.
Those are terrible villains.
Right.
Having a fleshed out backstory, which we saw at the beginning with his experience in the Holocaust, like all these things that like I think import so much background that you don't necessarily have to flesh out, that he definitely embodies really well. To that, and Stewart in that way is, I think, a great. Like I wrote a note. Like I don't know if it was maybe top 5, in the sense of like Stewart seemed to have been grown in a lab to play Charles Xavier.
Correct.
From a comic standpoint,
yep.
I mean, how would they know back in the '60s that a person would be born who eventually, from the movies, would just be perfect for this character? And so, yeah, I agree. Like they are phenomenal with what they're given, but yes, they are underused in that they are just, for a main villain, such a side element to this. And
Storm is underused.
Totally.
Like Storm comes in like Aquaman, where it's like when I'm needed, I'm going to come in and I'll throw some wind and lightning your way in a terrible line and then move on. And you're like, you're a pretty badass.
Yeah.
Like
you control the elements,
right? And now, nope, you're just gonna come in whenever. Yeah. So I think in that sense, I think they did that. But also, I wonder how much of that is. I mean, when Jackman is on screen, this is his first Hollywood role, and you just go, this. I watch him in this, and I see him in almost anything else since then.
Yeah,
and it's the same guy. There's not an evolution. He just is that awesome.
Yes,
and everything he does.
Yes.
And you're just like, we watched Night at the Museum 2, right? And he's in there, and he's
3.
Was it 3?
Yeah.
No,
when they're in England.
Yeah, when they're in England.
Yes.
And yeah, it's 3.
Yeah.
And he just makes fun of himself as Wolverine, and
Yes.
everything you see him in, he just is amazing. And this is the first movie he's in Hollywood. And so I wonder how much of that, when it comes to underusing Storm, comes from either rewrites or sort of understanding that, like, this guy we need to put more in front of the camera.
I can see that because I mean, from the comic standpoint, Storm was always second in command to Cyclops. From just like a hierarchy standpoint, I remember it. People that might listen to it might be like, "Tim, what the hell are you talking about? You're an idiot." You know
yeah, I'm right here. Yeah, you're actually incorrect, but yeah.
What? Who?
She was higher up than Cyclops was.
Was she?
Yes.
Okay, so even that. Okay, that even proves my point more of her being so important in the X-Men leadership chain that she is basically relegated to being a side character.
Yeah, because in the movie here, it's Jean Grey is more of a
Yes.
is sort of the secondary leader.
Yes,
but no, in the comics and in the comic
that's true.
TV show, she was more of a leader in that sense.
And so I think about
because Cyclops has always been kind of a hothead in that sense, so he was never as much of a leader.
So thinking about that, I could see there's some element where they might have hit on this character who's beloved by all comic book fans who love X-Men, but then you combine it with Jackman, who comes out of nowhere, and they might have been like, oh, okay, we got to maybe adjust this because this guy is lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
And I think about
tell me a movie Hugh Jackman's in that he is not. When he comes on screen, he's not who you look at.
Yeah,
he just is the person you look at.
Yeah, he's. And I was trying to think. I
mean, all respect to James Marsden, and we love him, and he's gorgeous. But when they're on there together, it's Hugh Jackman I'm looking at.
Which is amazing because the character of Wolverine's like 5'2", and Hugh Jackman's like 6'2".
Yeah.
And so they had
Wolverine's the Tom Hanks of superheroes.
Yes.
Or not Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise.
Yes.
Wolverine's the Tom Cruise of superheroes. He's that short?
Yes. So I think they had to put Marsden on like boxes or whatever to make him appear taller.
Yeah, at one point, you can see his platform shoes. Like when they're going in, you can see it's like a 3-inch platform shoes that he's got on just to be somewhat close to him.
Yes. And so I think about like how absurd that is with having Jackman cast. But I was trying to think about as we came to this podcast, like I don't, and watching it again, he is just unbelievably gravitating as an actor that I can't think, and maybe it's recency bias or just not exhausting all the powers of the internet, but I don't know that I can think of a similar come out of nowhere and establish that presence, because it's not just a variation of a theme that he did thereafter. I mean, he's a action superhero. He's a Tony Award actor. He's in musicals. He's in comedies. He's romantic comedies. The versatility of him was obviously unknown, but comes out of nowhere in terms of establishing that presence, at least top 5.
No, and
for that.
I agree. And I think that for me, he is this generation's Paul Newman I think underappreciated a lot because of how he looks. Paul Newman was not. He was very well respected as an actor, but just from a critical acclaim or Oscars and things like that, that was later on in life as he grew older. And the industry was just different. Actors came up differently, so it's hard to compare. That's apples and oranges. But for me, he is the closest to him in film history would be like Paul Newman.
Sure.
Of just, you can't keep your eyes off of this person on the screen.
Yeah.
So that's
a great comparison, because I think about like...
Damn right.
You're welcome, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Tell me more. I think about like, like last episode we talked about Kate Hudson, where you feel like, man, she's a star. She's coming here. But she was in a few movies beforehand, or similar type of like looking back, like what struck me was thinking about like someone like Bruce Willis for Die Hard.
Yeah.
But he was in the TV show before. Moonlighting,
yes. Yep.
So he had a presence before and just established himself as a movie actor.
Right.
Or Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, but she was in
Steel Magnolias and Mystic Pizza. Exactly. Come on.
Like, so I think about, I don't know that I can, the only one maybe I thought was someone like Alan Rickman, actually thinking about the Die Hard.
Sure.
In terms of,
but
he was a villain and did a great job. But again, it's the versatility of Jackman that I think follows, where he can truly do anything. That I was shocked to look back at this now and see just how much he commands the screen for a nobody.
Right. He was unknown up until this.
Exactly.
And no, I agree. And because up until then, most of the time people who end up in a role like this have a few roles leading up to it.
Yes.
Tom Hanks, he stars in a few little things along the way, and then he ends up in big.
Yes.
And then he ends up on the path that he is now. But you have these roles leading up to. Tom Cruise is another one. He's got a couple little things along the way, and then boom, he's in Risky Business. So usually it takes a little bit. And with Hugh Jackman, it was all who you knew. Like, he has that presence, but then he had enough people who knew of him, and it was fortuitous that somebody else dropped out because of this. Which I don't know if we'll talk about later, but we might talk about.
Trivia!
I don't know. Is it your trivia, my trivia?
We'll
find out.
Do we cross streams?
I don't know.
Man.
We'll see.
We'll find out.
The other thing I will say, to keep going on Deep Impact, I think what this does well, in building this world, it taps into human feelings.
Yeah.
And it does the abandonment, love, compassion, all these feelings that these mutants, which I found interesting that Xavier calls them average human beings, like regular humans.
True.
Not mutants. So it's mutants and average human beings. And then Senator Kelly, when he dies, asks Storm if she's afraid of normal people.
Huh.
And I don't know if that was on purpose, but you have a quote-unquote normal person asking that question, but you have a mutant saying that these are average humans, and you have mutated humans. Like, really putting them on the same level. So as much as I want to crap on the writing, and there's many, many, many things to talk about, that is a really great juxtaposition of having somebody with a lot of compassion in Xavier and somebody without a lot of compassion in Senator Kelly, and seeing how they describe them. And boy, 20 years later, does that not hit home when it comes to our current political climate?
Yes.
And so that definitely stood out to me.
Yeah, it's more nuanced than I anticipated. Yeah.
I got a lot of layers, baby.
But speaking of that, like, I was thinking, watching again, the tiny scene of Rogue on the train waiting to leave.
Sure.
And seeing across the walkway a mother and a child, her son, and just her putting her hand on his face as a gesture of affection that I didn't appreciate when I first saw that. But I think now, certainly with kids, and as we talk about climate, being on lockdown for so long, like that, I never fully put it together for someone like Rogue, who just the simple thing of human contact is so dangerous for her. And we always talk about superheroes in comic books with their superpowers and the limitations, or what is a problem for them. That type of simple thing would separate her so much that I didn't quite fully appreciate. Maybe 20 years ago, that I appreciate much more now. Of that would be devastating to have to be physically distant, even though you're close to people, but you can never touch anybody because of what might happen. That it resonated for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting little one-off clip.
Yeah.
If you were looking on a platform, I wouldn't notice that, but somebody who can't be touched would notice that.
Yeah, a simple thing like that.
The last couple things I have, I'm shocked in a sense of no makeup Oscar nod. Like, if you look at Mystique.
Totally.
Like, this is... She had, like, somewhere I wrote this down, the number of pieces she had
like
on her.
And stuff
for her. Prosthetics. It was, like, 70-something prosthetics. And they kept her actually separate from the cast for a lot of the shooting.
Really?
To kind of make their reaction to her showing up different. She had said that she hated filming this in a lot of ways because she was very separate from the cast. But she had all these prosthetics, and she's in the, like, you can't throw a nod their way.
Yeah.
Like, that is impressive makeup. That's not CGI. That's actual makeup that they put her in. So I was really surprised by that. I do think later on, if with more appreciation of these movies, I do think that probably would have been like an understand. Like, I'm going to give this nomination there.
True. I mean, we saw that maybe a year later when like Frida Kahlo Oscar award for the unibrow.
The unibrow, basically. Yes.
Wins over all the orc army. So
yeah.
I guess I can see the Academy costuming and makeup being like, maybe our mark is being.
Yeah, we could go on rants about the Academy, and I love the Oscars.
Yes.
But I swear to God, they get it wrong more than they get it right.
Yeah.
2 other things I had. Do you have any others?
The only kind of final thing I had was in the catalog of Marvel characters, superheroes and villains, and what might be possible to tap into.
I'm going to go with this, I think.
They tap into Toad?
I'm circling it right now.
Might be Toad. The dumbest character that I think I've seen of any of these.
Yeah. I wrote down, is there a worse bad guy than Toad?
And all the respect to Ray Park, like, doing what he can with it, but...
Yeah, Darth Maul, baby.
Man, just a ridiculous...
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to climb up things, have a ridiculous tongue that it's just... Or, like, I'm going to sit there while Kelly gets changed and, like, eat a bird. It just is like...
I'm going to scare him by eating a bird.
Exactly.
Like, that's gross, dude. I'm not scared. I'm weirded out.
Like, jumping off the Statue of Liberty and, like, crushing people and be like, whatever.
Hey, this is normal for me.
I was like, God, watching it again, be like, I'm all about the camp and embracing the absurdity, but dear God, so stupid. Here endeth the rant.
Yeah. I will say the one thing I really appreciate watching it back, the costumes, they really could have gone campy.
Sure.
And because if you've watched the cartoons or read the comic books, the costumes, and they joke about it in the movie, but the costumes are just weird when you actually look at them. Yeah. And so they could have done what, say, like DC did in the 90s with the last couple Batman movies. They went over the top and it's campy and fun. But they didn't do that. They actually ended up going, there's no weird costume. The weirdest thing they do is the hair of Wolverine. Which I think is kind of funny. Yeah. And then they make fun about the yellow spandex later. But otherwise, everybody's costume is just normal clothes. It's just, they're among the world.
Yes.
And I love that from a costuming standpoint. But the number one thing that I took from this, which is the number one thing I take from anything Marvel related, is how impressive Marvel Studios is as what they were able to do. Because this is a good base, but the Marvel Studios comes out, gets the rights to all these other films that they can do, that they can get, because Spider-Man was Sony and this was Fox, but Marvel does what they do, and now we're talking 20 years later, and the only reason we're talking about this is because of what Marvel did after this.
Yes.
Without Marvel Studios and what they did, we're not talking about X-Men in 2000. And so we are, in that sense, it's a testament to this movie, because it did well, it made money, it was a blockbuster, and then they wanted to make more, and then Sony says, hey, we're going to make Spider-Man now, and what this spawned is awesome.
Yes.
But it makes what Marvel did later just that much more impressive. Because everything Marvel has touched and what they've created is outstanding, for the most part.
I agree, like, almost completely. However, I think we overlook some of their properties that they did around the same time that did not do so well. Like
around this time?
Yes.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but I guess what I'm saying is...
think about The Punisher.
Sure.
Hulk. Daredevil. Elektra. The Fantastic Four. You have, I agree, Spider-Man, X-Men created the world I think we live in now. I think you can trace it back to... Again, using genes as kind of a contact tracing perspective. X-Men and Spider-Man, absolute hit out of the park, phenomenal. But
first two.
That's true. First two. And then offshoots around that. But I think you also look at the other ones they tried to do and missed the mark.
Right.
That helped them, I think, retool
Sure.
for the current Marvel Cinematic Universe that we see now,
That's
where they perhaps had some misfires. I mean, they had like freaking Ghost Rider. Like,
Have you watched that movie?
No,
You
I've
haven't
never
the
seen
movie.
it.
You gotta watch that
Because
movie.
I don't.
No, you gotta.
I mean, I
watch
love
that movie.
Nick Cage, but
I can't stand Nick Cage most of the time. But you gotta watch. You gotta watch Ghost Rider.
But I think about
Yeah.
like that's their effort to become commonplace in society and like pop culture, movies, whatever it is. To me, I feel like, man, maybe have like a third party that comes in and says, like, that's not going to do good.
Sure.
Like, who the hell cares about the Punisher? Like, people do, of course. I don't want to dismiss the reality of like the affection for him.
Yeah, the Netflix series is awesome.
Exactly, because they had to retool and I think approach it differently. But I agree that it, for the most part, I mean, they're hitting great hits almost every single time. So I think I agree with you mostly with that.
Well, that's far for the course. All right. So our next segment, that was our longest segment of the night. We're going to jump into Drinking Buddies, the sequel.
Bum, bum, bum.
Right, which is where we have our reaction to our 4 beers of the night. And Drinking Buddies, the non-existent sequel. Tim, do you want to bring us through the beers again and we'll give our ratings?
Yeah, we'll go really quick here. I'm grabbing the...
or whatever, we can cut it down.
The cans from there. All right, we've got the Dare Mighty Things Wet Hopped IPA from the Brewing Project.
Did you want to go through these one by one? Like start with that and then...
Yes, actually, that's a great call.
Damn
I will
right.
hold off. Yes, so
all right.
that one.
Brewing
Wet
Project.
Hopped.
Tim, Dare Mighty Things, which is honestly a really great series, but I think they've overdone it.
Yes.
Like, when it first started, it was great,
Yes.
and then they just kept going with the name and all these different variations. But the Wet Hop Dare Mighty Things, what do you think?
It's funny you mention that because we talk about the X-Men series with variations and different versions. I mean, there's like, I think 11 different movies in the X-Men universe, like around like offshoots, prequels, and origin stories, what have you. I love Dare Mighty Things.
The first few, for sure.
I love this IPA. I cannot really tell. There's always so much going on in this like thick, hazy IPA. I guess I didn't see much of the wet hopped flavor to it. I think of wet hopped this time of year where it stands out and it's this like fresh, dank, phenomenal flavor. This just seemed like a normal one to me. So
yeah, what'd you give it?
Admittedly, 3.5. Still good.
3.5 even. Wow.
It didn't do anything much for me because to me it just tasted like their regular ones with like Mosaic and Citra, but I didn't tell that it was the type I'm expecting this time of year.
I came in at 3.75, so I'm not that much higher than you. But the difference for me was their regular Dare Mighty Things sometimes can get really heavy as you drink it. So at least this was a lighter version of it and something that was really well made because Brewing Project does their stuff really well. But I do agree in that it didn't taste different enough to where it felt special. And wet hops oftentimes are supposed to be like special.
Yes.
So I gave it 3.75. So I don't want to like poo-poo your 3.5, but at 3.75,
I think we're on the same page as far as like it didn't stand out like I was hoping.
So our second beer after that, we went from that to
the Toppling Goliath Dragon Fandango. Again, the sour with mango, passion fruit, and dragon fruit.
Sorry, I spoke over you. What was it?
We'll edit it again. Yeah. Toppling Goliath, the Dragon Fandango, the sour with mango, passion fruit, and dragon fruit. Very nice. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Passion fruit and dragon fruit.
Yeah, 4.5 for me.
Dragon fruit is always one of those flavors that I'm like, what the hell is dragon fruit? I know what it is. I used to work at Starbucks and they have a mango dragon fruit drink, but everyone would be like, what's dragon fruit? I honestly don't even know.
It's a marketing scheme.
Yeah, it's probably. You gave it 4.5, you said?
I did. I thought it was tart AF, I'll say.
Ooh.
And it was good. I've had ones with mango and passion fruit and some kind of variations, but not with dragon fruit.
No, the dragon fruit really brings it out.
It did, man. I don't know what it was. It totally stood out. I loved it. It was great. Loved it.
I gave it a 4. Sours are not always my favorite thing.
Sure.
Like, and I'm not biased against them. I do enjoy a lot of them, but I rarely go 4-5 on sours. It's just not my favorite thing. This isn't Cumulonimbus from Falling Knife is amazing. So I gave it a 4. I was probably between a 4 and 4.25, but like Ebert, I went on the lower end. So I went with a 4 on that one.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
so,
I would actually get it again. I would actually not seek it out, but if it was there, I'd definitely get it.
It's rare for me to seek out Toppling Goliath anymore, and I agree with you in that if that were on tap somewhere, I'd be like, I'll take that. That's better. I'll take that.
But the color was like this bright red that was really, really cool.
It was cool. After that, we went with
the Jack Pine Bonfire S'mores Stout
out of Baxter, Minnesota.
I give it a solid 4. I've had this every year around this time of the year. It comes out. I remember talking with.
I call shenanigans on this, man. Your previous ratings were like 4.75.
That's true. I've learned how to better shenanigans. I remember talking to the head brewer when they were in the smaller facility. Ooh. I know. I can't even name drop because I don't know. But he talked about the yeast they use for this is or maybe the malt, has a graham cracker note to it. He's like,
naturally?
Yeah, naturally.
Oh, interesting.
So it's not a synthetic. At least I will give a huge caveat. I didn't brew this, so I don't know the reality of it.
Yeah, you had one conversation with the head brewer.
He said he was.
Yeah,
maybe it wasn't him.
Just take his word for it. Exactly.
He's like, oh, hey guys, what's up? I'm the head brewer. You guys like my beer? But ultimately, it was a small thing we were at, and he talked about he didn't want to have synthetic, and I feel like the flavor comes through where it does feel like real marshmallow chocolate, and the ingredients, like you said, he had found that it has a graham cracker finish or taste. So he's like, I know what I can do with that. So put it together. So to me, I love it. It's perfect for this time of year in the fall. I thoroughly enjoy it.
I also gave it a 4, but I will say, and I agree with your previous 4.75 reviews.
It was for the style.
You were also around a fire when you did it, and I think it matters that we're in a basement right now.
Yes.
Versus an actual, like if I were outside on a 50 or 60 degrees right around a fire, my rating probably would have been higher. So I think it's a great beer. I also gave it a 4. I just really enjoy giving you crap. So
I appreciate it. It's contextual.
So brothers are for.
Exactly.
So, but it does need a fire to do it. I think that's the point. It's fall. If you had released this in July, it would have been, what are you doing right now? Yeah. So this makes sense. So our last beer is
from LTD Brewing of Hopkins. This is our 2020 Sleepwalker, a triple IPA, which hops have Warrior, Cascade, Centennial, Australian Galaxy, Citra, Simcoe, and Sabro, whatever, with honey from the Bell Bee Ranch.
I think that's, and Blake, the owner, you like the head brewer, I'll talk to the owner.
You got a name drop, actually.
He can, I think one of their employees, actually, or former employees, actually is, he owns that farm or something like that. But yeah. What'd you think? We've had this before, but what do you think about Sleepwalker?
Well, should I defer to you so you can have your moment, and I will talk about your rating.
There are very few beers that, when they're released seasonally, that I go out of my way to get. This is easily my favorite beer in town. It is, without it, I'm not saying it's the best beer ever. It is my favorite beer in town. Because you end up, it's, most triple IPAs you buy are like getting slapped in the face with hops.
Yes.
And this is over the top.
Yes.
Oh, I'm supposed to trademark that. Sorry, Kara gave me that. Slapped in the face with the hops is from Kara. Excuse me. TM. But it is like, they're just over the top. Okay. Whereas I think they bring this down. You would not know this is a triple IPA when you're drinking it if you were just handed to somebody.
No.
And that there's a sweetness to it. And whenever they release it, it is always, I'm there the day of. That's the only beer I do that with. So in that sense, it is easily my favorite beer. I love it. It's a 4.75 for me, which there is no such thing as a 5 beer in my world. I think maybe I did way back in the day.
Sure.
But you can always improve. There's nothing as perfect. And this isn't Spotted Cow, Matt. But it is There are really great beers out there, but it's not perfect. This, to me, is a 4.75, and it always has been. I love this beer.
I love getting text from you when it's getting released.
Yeah, it's like, Sleepwalker, oh my God!
You're like a kid on Christmas, like, oh my God, 2 days?
100%. It's, as a grown-up, this is my Christmas morning. It comes out every September, October, and lately they've done it with their Oktoberfest, which is fine. But I think Sleepwalker can have its own holiday in Hopkins, and that'd be fine.
Like, you just, I think, stock up on this so much that eventually you're like, oh, I should probably get to these. They're just,
yeah,
they're going to go bad. No, I love it. No, and I'm so happy that you actually keep this on your radar, because I agree. This beer is phenomenal. And I think of like size 11 from Steel Toe, and some from Stone with a triple IPA. That I thoroughly enjoy. Don't get me wrong, but they are a slap to the face with hops.
Yeah,
is that how that works?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
This is super mellow. It's got a balance that I don't know that I can find anywhere else with this level of like ABV and hop.
Yeah. What is it at again?
Oh,
the ABV.
Yeah.
You got it there.
Where are you here? We can edit this out.
Yeah.
Dead air. It doesn't. Yeah, the royal we.
It's higher.
It doesn't actually list it.
Oh, well then, all right. You can continue your thought, and I'll research it.
God, those assholes.
God dang it, LTD.
No, it's a lot. It's probably like 10.5, maybe 11%. But I find it to be incredibly agreeable. I love they put in crowlers, thankfully.
Yep.
So it's it's great. I give it a 4.5.
Yep.
So, but I'm right there with you, where this is a variation of outside the world of IPA, double IPAs. It just steps up.
It's 11.5%.
11.5.
And you wouldn't know it. You drink this thing, and it's 11.5, and you would say that's on par with any stout out there.
Yeah, I mean, you have barrel-aged stouts.
Right.
Of that high of ABV. And
yep.
You go, whoo, man, I can feel this, or I can tell it's that high. This, super mellow. Maybe it's the honey, but anyway, it's phenomenal.
Well, I got to say, in all of the reactions I got from our first episode, all like 50 of them, I was surprised how many people liked this next segment. And probably because it got me so upset. Honestly, I heard a lot of people say that they enjoyed your terrible, terrible hot take.
My take?
Of Almost Famous being a Christmas movie.
I stand by it.
Right. And we'll see. But this is Hot Shots and Hot Shots Part 2, where Tim and I offer up a hot take that might not have been there 2 decades ago. Tim, do you have a hot take? Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first this time? What do you want?
You go first this time.
Ooh.
Is that okay?
Right. It is okay. I actually did not have too much of a hot take on this.
Oh, good. You go first. I got a hot one.
Oh, sweet. All right. So my hot
maybe
take...
not. I don't know. Sorry. That might have been too much of a hyperbole. But
yeah.
We'll see.
You're setting yourself up. My hot take is that it can be argued that DC is the sole reason that Marvel is as good as it is today.
Tell me more.
When you think of the 90s and the Batman movies, all you had in the 90s from a superhero standpoint was either Batman or like Spawn or
That's right.
They had The Shadow, and what's the one with Billy Zane where he's like the purple guy?
Oh,
I can't remember his name. All of a sudden,
crap.
Yeah,
I can picture it in his stupid superhero costume. By
the Phantom. It was the Phantom, right?
Phantom, yes.
So the Phantom. If it's not, who cares if we're wrong? Because it's straight garbage.
Yes.
But that's what you had. You had just these terrible movies. But then Batman in '89 or whatever of Tim Burton, that's a classic.
Yeah.
Batman Returns is good.
Yes.
And then Joel Schumacher took it and basically made it in a lump of clay, and then threw it on the ground and stomped on it.
Let's take
and then
the darkest superhero ever and put neon colors.
Right. It was terrible. And so you referenced the nipples earlier.
Yes.
What DC did with those last 2 movies, and Batman Forever was actually not that bad. It was pretty campy, but it was not that bad. But Batman and Robin is awful. It's awful. And I think because of that, the next major superhero movie we get being X-Men, which is grounded in reality.
Yep.
And we go into a movie theater thinking, here's another superhero movie, and it's nothing like what DC had put out there in the mid to late 90s.
Yep.
That all of a sudden, that's what stood out, was that these are characters that stand... they're like human. They have human emotions. There are things that we can relate to, and we want more of this. And that's what you get. And without DC's just messing it up on the Batman franchise, not to say that Marvel wouldn't have succeeded, but I do feel like when you come into this movie with that history, suddenly I want more of this, and I want more of this from this storyline.
Sure.
Not from what's come before. Because what did we see later when Batman Begins comes out in 2005 was grounded in realism.
Huh.
Right? And so I just think what we have today and the expectation we have in Marvel movie or comic book movies or superhero movies, I think is directly responsible for DC, frankly, effing it up on the Batman franchise. So Marvel owes a debt of gratitude to DC. Is my hot take.
I like the premise. I like the idea that DC had almost a level of hubris that they were,
to which I think they still do. I think DC is very full of themselves as a company.
Yes.
They're doing better now, but they have always felt Superman was first, and so we're best.
Yes.
I love Superman as a comic, and I own more Superman comics than any others. But yeah, they are full of themselves.
And Batman is, as you know, the greatest superhero of all time.
I actually agree.
So to me, that is a special place in my heart.
Yep.
But I could get on bandwagon. Like, I agree with some of that premise of they had messed it up so much. But I wonder if some of it is also the timing. Like I said, I mean, we see the other properties they tried to launch, like Hulk, Daredevil, Elektra, that had some element of a darker take to it and didn't do well. And so I wonder if it's just somewhat serendipitous that X-Men was grounded, but a different kind of grounded that allowed them to kind of expand. But
the only thing I'll say to that is X-Men was substantially more popular. Daredevil and all the other ones are very small comics that I don't think they had high expectations of them being tentpole features.
Sure.
X-Men the Uncanny X-Men was around for 50 years at this point. And I think that for them to dive into that is more... I feel like those other movies that they failed at really... I think that they were always going to fail because they weren't that popular. Those are destined, as we found out now 20 years later, to be TV characters.
Yes.
Daredevil, the TV show, is outstanding.
Oh, so good.
And so I do think that you end up with this level of understanding that X-Men was meant to be a film, and the other ones, because they had the rights to them, they just didn't work.
Yeah, the bar had been set so low, and I feel like maybe people had not been jaded, but it was like after Batman around, be like, oh my god, what a steaming pile of garbage this whole genre might be. That this was, as we've talked about at length tonight, does not necessarily hold up well, but the time was a ray of hope. Wow, you could have this interesting, compelling story with multiple characters and have it be really interesting and compelling. I agree. Had it come out where DC was killing it and doing really good, by comparison, this would have been like... Ugh.
It might not have worked as well. Yeah. So there you go. Tim, Hot Shot Part 2.
I know Marvel and Disney will have no intention of doing this, but I think... And sorry, let me back up one quick second. For those who possibly have not seen Logan or Endgame, Avengers Endgame, they're a couple years old, at least one.
Watch them.
Please stop, go watch them, and then come back. So a spoiler caveat, you've been duly warned. I truly think that the Wolverine character should just be retired. He should stay dead and not brought into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And let me tell you why.
I'm listening.
As you ponder that. Obviously, passing the mantle was done well for Tony Stark and Steve Rogers in Endgame, and they had such phenomenal solo franchises, and again, the crossing over so many of them, showing that the characters and what they embody can be passed on to someone else who can carry on their legacy. In the case of Spider-Man for Tony and the Falcon, as we'll see with the Disney Plus series to come. Yeah. So they've already set up, either through technology, wielding the shield, or like the mech nanotechnology suits, that the essence of that type of character can be transferred. However, with all due respect to Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, I think those characters are going to outlast those actors, which is good. But I think, I'm watching it again, Jackman just clearly embodies this character. And
yeah, not only because he wears a sweater all the time with the natural hair he has.
Exactly.
It's man pelt, the attitude of it, for sure.
I just feel like it came out of nowhere, and we've seen his offshoot characters. Although I should say, I have not seen the original Wolverine movie because I heard it was straight up garbage, so didn't want to see it. But the sequel, and then I truly believe that Logan is probably top 5 comic book character stories. Just phenomenal movie. I don't know that for Wolverine.
Oh, Logan the movie.
Yes.
You're saying, yeah.
Yep. Logan the movie, which, by the way, if you're listening to this, find, if you can, either through special features or whatever, the noir version, black and white. It's incredible. But what I'm trying to say is, I truly think like Wolverine is a character that the violence, the language, he's so raw, abrasive, in many ways unlikable, that Logan was the pinnacle of that character, and seeing the weight and gravity of everything that he could have done in terms of the destruction that he had wrought, that I don't know that works well in the PG-13 Marvel Cinematic Universe world, that eventually the Avengers and the X-Men and everything under Marvel is going to come together. We know that. But I truly, this isn't like a Jack Nicholson with Joker and then Heath Ledger coming in and just a variation of that theme. The character to me is so linked to Jackman in the movies. Just kill him off. Don't have him come back. That's my hot take.
I mean, I don't disagree in a sense of, you made a great point at the end of, unless you have a story to tell that matters,
yes,
that is worth telling, and you can find an actor who can bring it in, then there's no point in doing it. Yeah. X-Men has a ton of other characters you can bring in. Why do you have to bring Wolverine in? Why not find somebody else? So I do agree, unless you find another story that is worth telling, a la the Joker and Heath Ledger. So unless you find that, kill him off. I agree.
We've seen Spider-Man can be done different ways.
Sure.
Different actors. I think there's a benefit that can come from maybe expanding the story. I'd watched Logan maybe a month ago. Mm-hmm. I don't know what else you can tell about this character that would, create new diamonds that you can understand. I just feel like, especially now watching, like, God,
especially
so
that
good.
movie, yeah,
like just kill him off.
Right, and whether this makes it in or not, the fact that Patrick Stewart was not nominated for an Oscar for that is a freaking crime. He is so good in that movie.
Yes.
But he's also never been nominated, period.
Yes.
So
Logan is just, anyway, check it out. So phenomenal. Watch it.
Our final segment of the show is one that both Tim and I have fun with, so hopefully you do as well. This is Quiz Show, where we search for fun, quirky, or even difficult trivia nuggets throughout our research for our next film. Last episode, Tim had 3 to my 1, so I'm bringing 2 to the party.
Woo-hoo!
But I believe, Tim, you are also bringing 3 again.
I do.
So do you want to start?
I will. So, and admittedly, many of these may be low-hanging fruit for you, except about actors.
See, here's my problem with you saying that. Is if I get it wrong,
oh, that's true.
now you're like, oh, what up, idiot? It was low-hanging fruit. Who knows?
Sorry, that is true. I will take that back.
Right.
Who knows how it's going to go?
That's right.
So while Hugh Jackman had minor roles in Australian films prior to X-Men, as we've talked about, he obviously exploded onto the scene with his breakout role as Wolverine, leading to a Guinness record as, quote-unquote, the longest career as a live-action Marvel superhero. However, he was not the original actor cast as Wolverine. Can you name that actor?
Was it Doug Ray Scott?
Is that your trivia too?
No, it's not. But if you don't know Doug Ray Scott, we would not be talking about this movie at all if Doug Ray Scott had been Wolverine. Do you know why he wasn't in this movie?
I do.
Why?
He was injured on the set of Mission Impossible 2.
Correct.
And it had to be delayed for him, and that caused him to be removed from the movie.
Yeah.
And they cast Jackman 3 weeks into principal photography.
Right. So if you don't believe in God, there's your example that a God exists. Because somehow he hurt, or she, #feminism, hurt Doug Ray Scott, so we didn't have to suffer through Doug Ray Scott being Wolverine.
Because it's shocking to me to think about him possibly being involved in this.
No.
Because outside of Mission Impossible 2, can you name a movie that he's in?
No. I would, if I really thought about it, maybe I could bring something down, but no, I can't. And he was fine. I'm sure he's in a lot of the movies, and I'm sure he's great, but he would not have embodied it like this. And I bet even he would admit the same thing.
But speaking of that, so a caveat or a offshoot of that trivia, and I don't know him, so I don't want to like crap all over this guy. So
yeah, whatever. He's not going to listen to it, so who cares?
Exactly. He also turned down, not from injury, but just didn't want to do it, the role of Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. Dude, either you or your agent, you got to get your stuff figured out.
That's a rough couple years for him.
Yeah,
that's rough.
Exactly.
And you end up in the worst of the Mission Impossible movies.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, dude, great.
So I guess we'll go back and forth, right? Because 3 and I have 2.
That's good.
Well, last week I had a cutting room floor one. This week I have a cutting room floor one. We mentioned Stan Lee was a cameo in this. He shows up somewhere. He's on the beach in the background. We didn't even they didn't make a big deal out of it, but he is. He's like a hot dog vendor on the beach when the senator comes out of the water.
Really?
Other cameos that exist in this movie are a guy named George Buza, who voiced Beast in the animated series. He's the trucker who brings her to the bar at the beginning, brings Rogue. Nice. And one of the producers and writers, Tom DeSanto, is in it as well. One cameo that was cut featured a young associate producer as a Weapon X tech. Who was that producer?
Dear God, dude. I have no idea. Producer, Weapon X. God. I have no idea.
I'm going to give you a hint. It's a Marvel producer. You should just know who it is.
Kevin Feige?
Yeah.
Oh, Kevin!
Because this was his first movie, which he had... I didn't know this. He had been hired on as an assistant to people on the way. And his knowledge of Marvel... And I can't remember her name. Excuse me. I apologize. But there was a producer on this who made him an associate producer because of his knowledge of Marvel. And where we would be now without that random associate producer credit for him it's unthinkable. But he was on the cutting room floor. Kevin Feige.
I love that. I love the trivia. Name someone not in this movie.
Exactly. But
no,
2 weeks in a row.
That's good. Exactly. Yeah. All right. I'm thinking about next week with the other movie. I'm watching for that. All right.
I promise you, I will not bring a cutting room floor trivia to our next episode.
It's okay.
I promise.
So in the 90s, Marvel Entertainment sought to release multiple comic book films in the early 2000s, as we talked about. Some were hits, some were misses. However, X-Men was not the first film released based upon a Marvel Studios property. What 1998 film has that honor?
Blade.
Nice. Technically, my only caveat is actually it's 1986 is Howard the Duck, but
yeah,
that's like whatever.
Yeah,
forget that noise. But Blade. Nice.
terrific movie.
I watched it last night.
Yeah.
Actually,
It's
because I
actually
thought
really
about the
good.
trivia,
Yeah.
and I had some time to kill. I was like, let's watch this again. And I gotta say, I'm shocked at Marvel choosing that as their first foray into the major world, being like deep, hard R, half vampire. It is weird, phenomenal. Anyway.
Yeah. I do think, because at some point Blade is actually in the Avengers, and I think in the comic books.
Sure.
And I always think like all these Avengers movies coming out and Blade of just sitting there in whatever New York City, like, can I get some help with these underground vampires?
Yeah, seriously.
And Captain America's like, nah, we're good.
Yeah.
You're on your own.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, so here we go. Box office trivia for you, Tim.
Boy.
The X-Men franchise has grossed just over $6 billion in worldwide box office, which this includes Deadpool, because that is actually under that. Deadpool and Deadpool 2. Making it the third highest grossing franchise ever, not including, if you look at the list, it includes all the Marvel comic universe, but we're not doing that. But it makes it the third highest grossing ever. Which two franchises are ahead of it?
Avatar and Star Wars.
You were wrong on both accounts.
What?
Yeah. Avengers.
Okay, you just said Marvel Cinematic Universe, not part of it.
All of them.
Okay.
All. If you include all 22.
Gotcha. Little caveat. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
The franchise. But no, actually, Star Wars is not on there.
Star Wars has not made more than X-Men?
Mm-mm.
What? All right, I got to know this.
Well, because you have one X-Men, if you include Deadpool and Deadpool, that's $6 billion. Yes. And the first three were in the 70s and 80s. So that just doesn't equate to more now.
Okay. Tell me more. I got to know this.
Avengers and Spider-Man. The Spider-Man series.
Sure.
Because that has 8 in it. So it has more modern movies.
Sure.
So this just has more. There are just more than... Yeah. There you go. Avatar, though, will eventually be up there, assuming James Cameron ever actually releases Avatar.
I don't know why I thought somehow...
That was Avatar is a terrible guess. Because it's not even a franchise anyway, because it's just a one-off right now.
$6.3 billion clearly is way more than like the $2 billion that Avatar has. And
but Avengers makes sense.
Star Wars franchise, really?
Yeah, but even the most recent terrible Star Wars movie made like $1.5 billion, which so then you have...
All right, the Marvel Cinematic Universe threw me off, but that's right. I will fully admit on podcast that they were terrible guesses.
All right, you have one more.
I do. Maybe it's a deep cut. We'll see. The score for X-Men was done by the late Michael Kamen, who also did the music for Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, The Iron Giant, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and HBO's Band of Brothers, amongst many other projects. Yet in 1999... Kamen worked with an American thrash metal band to adapt their work to be performed live with the San Francisco Symphony with an album titled S&M. What is the name of this metal band?
I'm going to say Metallica.
Boom.
There you go.
Did the S&M cue you off?
No, it was...
The timing.
That made sense timing-wise. So what we're seeing here is I'm 6 for 6 in 2 episodes.
Sure.
That's all that matters.
That works.
Yeah, we're good.
I don't know. We're padding your stats.
Any last thoughts on X-Men, Tim?
I was actually totally shocked that this didn't hold up like I thought it would.
Sure.
I'm so happy we're doing this to kind of review some that we haven't watched in quite some time. I mean, like I said, I watched Logan a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I watched the Phoenix one this summer. Total garbage. But this world of X-Men has been in our world, obviously, for so long that I haven't gone back to the original in so long. So happy we did because, man, outside of some of the stuff we talked about, it's a rough one. Yeah,
it doesn't hold up in a lot of ways, but it does set the stage really well.
Yes.
I don't really have any final thoughts necessarily, but I am glad we did this, and when we made this list, it was surprising how quickly X-Men raised to the top. She's like, of course you have to do X-Men.
We gotta watch this.
Yeah, and now I'm thinking the other movies... We maybe could have watched that movie.
Yeah.
But that's all right. Well, that's what the other things are for. What's our next movie?
Memento.
Memento.
Christopher Nolan's entrance onto the scene.
Yes, which I will be very curious how many people have actually watched that movie to know what the heck we're talking about when we actually watch the movie. So you got about a few weeks. Find Memento, watch it. Christopher Nolan, you've seen his other movies. You're going to want to watch this movie because it's going to be an interesting... We might have to have 6 beers, really, at that point.
Maybe.
That brings us to the end of our second and, frankly, best episode so far. Thank you for taking time to listen in and providing support and feedback to our little side hobby project. Follow us on Twitter at years_beers and on Facebook, or hop on over to 20years4beers.com for more information and pics of the show. We have lots of fun ways to stay informed with what's coming up next, trivia about our films, other random facts, and even a video or two. So check us out there. This has been 20 Years 4 Beers. My name is Steve.
I'm Tim.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Hold me closer, tiny dancer.